Alright, bada bing, bada boom, Nolan's in the room. Yeah, that's right. This week we're talking Tenet, or if you say it backwards, Tenet. You see what he did there? He's ever so clever, are we, Nolan? So sit back, relax, enjoy, learn a little bit, do something, eat some ice cream while we talk about Tenet. Now, I like a lot of Christopher Nolan's films. The Prestige is one of my favourite films of all time. However, I feel lately he's had the tendency to think he could just shit on a page and call it a script. That being said, I enjoyed this film. I liked it. It was good. Good fun. Just a very quick shout out to the guy who came to the Odeon in Swiss Cottage and decided to come into a cinema with 6 people in it and sit 2 seats beside me. Before going to see Tenet, I thought it was going to be another deliberately complex Christopher Nolan film. Tenet is a deliberately complex Christopher Nolan film. I don't know if it's because it's the first time I've been forced to focus intently on something for 2.5 hours in a long time, but I don't actually think that this is difficult to comprehend. I just think that once you've obtained that knowledge and how it works, it's hard to then keep up with what that means for the story and everything that's happening on screen. And my god, there's a lot. Christopher Nolan, I feel, has a tendency to under-explain the rules he creates for his worlds. Now, it's not his job to tell the audience every single detail, that would make it boring, but a little hand-holding might be nice, Nolan. The rules are established very quickly in Tenet, and then it's about connecting the dots yourself as to how all the rules work together. There's a lot to talk about here, so I'm just going to say spoilers right off the bat, just in case. Well, I mean, you don't watch a video for a movie you haven't seen. Go see the movie and then watch the video. Right? If you haven't seen this film and you're in the UK, you may as well. What else is there to do? And it's just come out in America, which is why I'm making this video. So, yeah. And it's like an actual rule now that no one can sit near you, so you don't have to deal with people who check their phone every 10 minutes. I'm talking to you, Swiss Cottage man! Okay, so first I'm going to have to talk about the time inversion, and then we'll talk about just the plot in like chronological order, because that'll make most sense, and I'll just explain it as we go. So Tenet's main bloody Nolan shenanigan is its use of time inversion, which is hard to describe. So, here we go. We've seen many different theories of time travel used in cinema throughout history, and of course Nolan wants to have a stab at it. As expected though, he delicately jumps past having to explain any of the rules to us, but he does at least try to sum it up in a fairly simple fashion. Basically, time is a progression of moving forward from the present to the future, thus creating the past. Make sense? You know, like, time is linear and all that. So, by using time inversion, people are able to invert objects or people so that they are travelling the opposite direction from the present to the past. So this ain't your typical time machine. If you wanted to travel back a month using time inversion, you would get inside the time inversion machine, come out inverted, and then wait the same amount of time backwards to get to that point. But also, there are now 2 of you. There's the original version of you that created the events of the past leading up to you getting inside the time inversion machine, and we've got you who's now been inverted moving backwards through those events created by the original you at the same time. So there's 2 of you. But you all know this, you've seen the film, so let's just get on with it. Okay, so the film starts with just this classic mega Nolan scene. You're straight in, there's no waiting around. We got John David Washington's character, and he's called the protagonist, but I'm not going to call him that anymore. I'm going to call him Mr. P, because protagonist is too long to say, and if I just call him P, it sounds like I'm calling him urine. So Mr. P and a bunch of other people are trying to stop a massacre in this concert. There's intel that somebody has illegal plutonium with them. Turns out, it's actually not plutonium, it's part of the algorithm, but Mr. P don't know what that is yet, so we'll come back to it. It's at this point something funky happens, right when Mr. P's having a fight with some guy. He's saved by someone that appears to be moving backwards. Oh, look at that, a piece of red string. I'm sure that will be important. Unfortunately for Mr. P, it all goes wrong and the Russians just blow it up. So Mr. P is tortured for information, but he doesn't give up because he's hard as fucking nails, and he chomps down on a big old suicide pill, and we think he's dead. Obviously, he's not dead. We're only like 15 minutes into the film, and Mr. P wakes up on a big-ass boat. This guy's then like, yo, you impressed me when you dined on that dirty death pill, and this was all just a big old test. You work for me now. Also, Tenet. Not gonna tell you what it means, but that's a word. You can have it. There you go. You live in this turbine now. Good luck. Can I just say that the fact that this guy lives in a wind turbine for a part of this film is the most fucking Nolan thing I've ever... John David Washington, though, is hella strong. Look at him go. That's mad. That's mad. Oh, little fact. Used to be a football player. There we go. Don't say you didn't learn anything here. Let's go. So after living in a wind turbine, Mr. P is finally taken ashore and he meets Laura, a scientist who explains to him the rules of time inversion. She is working on a wall full of bullets that have been inverted and show him that the bullets move backwards through time when he fires the gun. Boom! Time inversion! She explains that there is a scientist in the future who has discovered a way to invert the entropy of objects and can therefore send inverted objects back through time to them. This leads us very nicely on to Kenneth Branagh's character, who is the character that these people in the future are sending the objects back to. When Branagh's character was younger, he was part of the war, and in the war he found a large metal drum full of gold bricks and instructions directly written for him as to what he needed to do going forward. I just want to take this moment to say that Kenneth Branagh certainly makes some choices in this film. There's something in Nicolas Cage about his performance. He's just unrelentingly horrible, unrelentlessly. One of those, it's just mad. He makes some bold acting choices. I did see in an interview that Christopher Nolan told Kenneth Branagh that this character was just a straighten up bastard. There was no redeemable qualities there, and just to make this guy as horrible as he could. It kind of makes sense because Nolan wanted this film to be a spy film, and it feels very much that Kenneth Branagh is playing your stereotypical old school Bond villain. So Kenneth Branagh's character, who's called Sato, starts getting sent things from the people in the future. They start sending him pieces of what they call the algorithm, which is basically just a huge doomsday device. And is in fact what we saw at the start at the concert. It wasn't plutonium, it was the algorithm. It was a piece of that. Try to keep up. So Mr. P, armed with all the knowledge of time inversion, aims to track down an arms dealer named Priya, because he believes that they have some connection with the inverted bullets that he saw. He teams up with Robert Pattinson's character Neil, who seems to know a lot about Mr. P, and break into Priya's house. Turns out Priya's not really involved, but she leads Mr. P to Sato. Mr. P knows that Sato is a highly protected man and it would be impossible to get close to him, so he sets up a meeting with his wife, Kat. Turns out she fucking hates Branagh, but she has to stay with him because she loves their son, and she sold him a fake painting and he found out about it, and now he's super pissed off. Also, to top it all off, he sends his bodyguards anywhere she goes, so now Mr. P has to fight those motherfuckers. In this fight scene, and I like all the fight scenes, I think they're actually really interesting in this film. In this fight scene, John David Washington picks up a cheese grater, punches a guy in the face like 3 times with it, then pushes it on his cheek and rips that cheek right off. It is... Back to Kat. We learn that there was a time that Kat and Sato were actually happy, and it was back on their boat in Vietnam. But then one day Kat was coming back to the boat and she saw another lady dive off the edge of it. She was like, oh, this guy's cheating on me. And it hasn't been the same since. He only lets her see her son for a brief 5 to 10 minutes after school before his men pick him up. And he blackmails her with the fact that she sold him a dodgy painting and he could just rat her out to the cops at any moment. Kat tells Mr. P that she will set up a meeting between him and her husband if Mr. P does her a favour. And that favour is to go into the vaults where the painting is stored and burn it so that he no longer has a strong hold over her. So Neil and Mr. P crash a huge plane into the vaults. It's great. And you know, they actually bought the plane. It was cheaper to buy a plane and then, you know, boom. Whilst they're in the vaults, Mr. P has a fight with a person who appears to be moving backwards. It's happening again. Inside Sato's vault, they find a time inversion machine. And this is where the assailant comes from, and they have a bit of a fight, but he gets away. Mr. P's like, this is some mad shit. He's like, we need to get out of here. And they get out of there. And then he tells Kat that he got rid of the painting, even though he never did. It was a big fib. So after this, Mr. P goes back to Priya and he's like, look, how am I going to get close to Kenneth Branagh? This is impossible. She suggests that the only way to get close to him is to steal plutonium for him because it's the only thing he really wants. So he decides to go and steal some plutonium. So he's like, yo, Sato, I'll steal plutonium for you, but I need you to give me one condition. I need you to let your wife, Kat, go, because you're just horrible. Okay, right, then we get this big heist scene that is on the road, and it's just madness. There's cars going backwards. It's just, it's impossible to comprehend. This is one of the scenes in the film that confirmed to me that this is a movie that you just have to see twice, because without the knowledge of the entire film, it's just impossible to gauge what is happening on the screen. That being said, really cool scene. I'm excited to see it again and you know, get it. So the plutonium that Sato wants isn't actually plutonium at all, it's another part of the algorithm, but Neil and Mr. P managed to retrieve it. Oh no, here we go. Kenneth Branagh in a gas mask comes along in a car with a gun to Kat's head. These guys are inverted. They be moving backwards. Mr. P gets captured by Sato because the roads are just madness. There's cars going backwards, and there's this weird car that joins in, and we'll get back to it, that does like flips and shit. And who's in the car? Oh, we'll find out soon. Keep watching. And Neil calls in for backup. His backup is basically a team of time-traveling soldiers. These be your TENET boys. But it's too late because Mr. P's been taken by Sato. We're back at Sato's lair, and Sato gets his henchmen to hold Mr. P down while he jumps in the time inversion machine. Whilst on the other side of the glass, Sato explains to Mr. P that his team performed a temporal pincer movement, which basically just means half his team went forward in time, the other half went backwards in time, and that's how they were able just to dominate over Mr. P and his team. He demands that Mr. P tells him where the part of the algorithm is that he stole on the highway. Mr. P's like, nah, I'm not telling you that. So Sato, the sick son of a bitch, shoots his wife with an inverted bullet, which we've learned is just like 100 times worse than a regular one, because it's going the wrong way for your body, and it's just horrible. The TENET boys finally show up, but it's too late because Sato runs off, but he runs off backwards. Ooh, he's going to go get the fucking algorithm. Okay, so for a large majority of this film, people wear gas masks, and they do that when they're inverted, because when your whole body's inverted, that means your lungs are inverted. So instead of breathing in oxygen, you effectively breathe in carbon dioxide. So you have to have a little canister of gas. Okay, that makes sense. So when you're inverted, you need a gas mask. There we go. Boom. So Kat's been shot, and she's in a bad way. Mr. P and Neil figure out that the only way to treat her is if the whole team get in the time inversion machine and invert themselves to going backwards. They hope that this will give them enough time to save Kat, and that they can get back to Sato's time inversion machine in his vault so that they can revert back to being normal. So while Kat's getting fixed up, Mr. P goes back to try to stop Sato from getting the algorithm on the highway. Unfortunately, this does not go to plan because Sato knows what he's doing when it comes to this time travel shit, and Mr. P ends up helping Sato get the algorithm all along. Yes, it was Mr. P in the other car. Yes, we're getting there. Okay, so let me tell you what Sato's done here, because it's actually really clever. So when Sato was here the first time in his gas mask on the highway, that was this time. We're all together on how that works. We see those things moving backwards as we follow the characters who are moving forwards, but then they invert themselves and go backwards and do it. So it always happened. We're all together on that, right? So what Sato has done is, after he shot his wife, he went back and got his other wife and then met up with Mr. P on the highway to steal the piece of the algorithm. Inverted Mr. P tries to come back to stop him from stealing the algorithm, but accidentally actually helps him steal the algorithm, which was all part of Sato's plan. It's madness. It's time madness. Okay, maybe it wasn't a part of Sato's plan, but it was a part of Nolan's plan, and it works. Alright, it works. So the algorithm retrieval plan didn't really work too well, but there's no time to lose because Mr. P and Neil need to get back to Sato's time inversion machine in his vault. How are they gonna do that? They know of an exact moment in history where they can get into that vault because they crashed a big plane into it in the first act. So they're going to go backwards in time and sneak in then. While they are here, inverted Mr. P has a fight with regular moving forward Mr. P, and we realize that they were the people fighting in the first bit. So now we know, so they were fighting each other. See, it all makes sense. So our Mr. P inverts himself back, and he's now traveling through the world, the same time as the past Mr. P. So it's interesting, we got two Mr. P's now. So Priya tells our Mr. P that Sato is only doing this because the people in the future want to blow up everybody in the past because global warming has become such a huge problem for them. Good news! Kat's been healed from her inverted bullet. We find out that Sato is dying from a rare pancreatic cancer and believes that if he dies, well then the world may as well die with him. So he's like, yeah, send the bits back to me. I'm gonna blow it up when I die. We also learn that Sato is travelling back through time to the day that he was actually happy with his wife back on the boat in Vietnam. And that's the day he's gonna pull the dead man switch and then blow up the world. Sato thinks he's super clever because he's doing this whole I'm travelling backwards and I'm travelling forwards and I'm planning the death of the world thing. But Kat and Mr. P know exactly what he's doing and they make a plan. She plans to continue heading backwards in time so she can stop Kenneth Branagh killing himself on the boat. And Mr. P, Neil and the time-travelling TENET soldiers decide to do a temporal pincer movement because it's the only movement people know in this film. They figure out that all the pieces of the algorithm have been assembled in an abandoned Soviet city, and they decide to go there with half the troops moving forward and the other half moving backwards. Here's where it gets kinda tricky. The scene on the battlefield is just mad. It's incredible. I can't believe somebody sat down and edited that. It must have just been the bane of their life. Half the teams are going forward, half the teams are going backwards. Mr. P makes his way to where the algorithm is kept and he is trapped in because the place is booby-trapped. Mr. P makes his way down the corridor and finds himself at a locked gate. The algorithm is on the other side and there's a big old bad guy there too. On the other side of the gate, in front of Mr. P, is a body on the ground. Oh, look, it's that red piece of string. It's important it all comes together. Just as the big bad guy points his gun at Mr. P's head and we think he's going to blow his brains out, the body comes back to life, springs up, takes the bullet for him, knocks that guy away and then runs off. The algorithm's been stopped. He's a hero. Meanwhile, Inverted Kat waits for her inverted husband, I know, a little bit confusing, but just keep with it, to get to the boat so she can try to prolong his death so he doesn't pull the trigger on the big explodey device that is the algorithm. But this guy has just been so horrible to her that she just can't let him go free without knowing that she fucking hates him. So she whips out her gun and she's like, yo, I'm not your wife, I'm your inverted wife, and she shoots him and fucking kills him. But it's fine because we got there in time, the algorithm didn't go off, and justice has been served, Branagh. Kat then jumps off the boat right before non-inverted Kat and non-inverted Branagh get back, and this is the moment where regular Kat sees the lady jump off the boat and her marriage is ruined. Oh, it would have happened all along. This moment is actually really important. It's the moment that kind of grounds the rules for this universe in Tenet, and it just shows that it's all inevitable. If we zoomed back on history, even with all the inversions, everything that happened had to happen so things would happen. That's kind of what they're trying to say. Tenet. Anyway, back at the bunker with the algorithm, Mr. P is saved by Neil, who drags them out of the bunker with a big old truck. So, all is good. Mr. P, Neil, and Ives decide to split up the algorithm and hide it so it's never used. As Neil walks away, Mr. P sees the red string hanging out of his bag and he realizes that it's been him all along. So he's like, yo, what's the deal with that? And Neil tells him that they've known each other a long time. In fact, Mr. P is the man who brought Neil into Tenet. And not only that, Mr. P is also the founder of Tenet. This means at some point Mr. P will invert himself again and go back and set up Tenet. There's more, but I just want to say very quickly that I think this ending moment is very rushed. So rushed that I didn't really comprehend what Neil said next until I was on my way home. I just think it's a moment that could have been embellished a bit more. Then Neil says he won't go home with them because he's going to stick around for a while and sort everything out. Mr. P is very teary at this because he knows Neil is now going to invert himself and go back to the bunker and save Mr. P by the gate and then get shot in the head. I just feel that it was a shame that the emotional impact of this moment only really hit me once I had processed everything that happened in the film, and I think with a bit more explanation I would have been able to feel that impact in the moment. Maybe that was just me. The film ends with Priya trying to assassinate Kat outside the school while she's visiting her son, but Mr. P's there and he stops her. He's like, yo, that's a terrible thing to do, stop. The final shot of the film is Kat finally getting to walk her son home from school. And that's Tenet. Look, I know there's things I didn't explain, but to be honest, it would take ages to unpack the entire film. Michael Caine was in this film, but is even worth mentioning. He was just doing an impression of himself. There's a scene when they go out racing on boats, and my god, I didn't even understand that boats could do that. Like, what is the physics of these boats? They fucking fly on the water. And Kat tries to kill Sato by pushing him off the boat like it's a whole thing, but there wasn't room for it in this explanation. I'm not a miracle worker. I mean, there it is. I just laid it out in front of you. I just tried to make it easy. I mean, Nolan kind of was a bit vague on everything that was happening, so can you blame me? But I like this film. I think it was good. I think it made more sense than some of his other films, and it did lack a bit that the characters don't really have that much of a backstory, but I mean, that's most Nolan films. There you go. I mean, Tenet. I've spoken too long. Go watch it again.